Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where anime music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 3 soundtracks from the world of anime, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the anime they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory.
It's April 1st, 2020, and I'm Matt Zawodniak with your anime music report. Joe, what are this week's series?
Up first is a show about driving fast on mountain passes while accompanied by an iconic Eurobeat soundtrack, 1998's Initial D.
Following that is 1998's Cowboy Bebop, the adventure of bounty hunters in a setting of space opera meets noir meets comedy meets cyberpunk, all with an eclectic jazzy soundtrack.
And following that is the epic orchestral tracks of a gateway anime that helped the franchise become a multimedia juggernaut, 2011's Fate Zero.
Welcome to this special installment of Original Soundchat, all themed on anime.
Yeah!
Hooray! Matt, welcome to the show, co-host on Joe's other podcast, Masterpieces, but joining us here on Original Soundchat for this special installment. How are you?
Doing very well. It's, I don't know if you've been reading the news, but things have been a little hectic lately. So I'm just trying to stay sane. I went for a nice walk today, just walk around the neighborhood for an hour. And that's just, getting by as much as anyone can right now.
No kidding. It's a good time to do a podcast remotely in this crazy, crazy world. Joe, you doing well?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to do this is going to be a little weird because A, we've never done one of these shows with 3 people before. B, we've never done one about anime and not video games. But I mean, it's April 1st.
It took less than 3 minutes for you to go from gotta keep kayfabe to, oh boy, this is the first time we've done any of this, huh?
Kayfabe's not real. Legitimately not real. But yeah, I think that a lot of people have been having thoughts of should we do April Fool's things this year? This year seems like kind of a bad year to do it. But I don't know. I feel like this kind of thing where it's just changing the status quo, but you still get some content out of it. I think it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you've had this in the works for months. It's good to finally see it realized, even though it's under strange circumstances.
I'm pretty sure you first approached me in I want to say June, something like that.
That sounds about right. I think it was shortly after last year's April Fools.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So yeah, it's gonna be a good time, and let's jump on right into it with speed. And speaking of speed, let's talk about Initial D. Initial D began airing originally on April 18th, 1998 on Fuji TV and aired its final episode on June 22nd, 2014. It is based on the 48-volume manga of the same name by Shuichi Shigeno, which began running in Weekly Young magazine in June of 1995, running all the way to July of 2013. So this is a long-running series either way.
Yeah, I didn't know it went for that long. I thought this was exclusively a 90s thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
Nah. I also didn't know that it ended after I graduated high school. I also figured that it at least ended in the mid 2000s or something like that. But no, 2014, man. We were adults when this show ended. Initial D tells the story of a young man named Takumi Fujiwara, a high school student who also works a part-time job at a local gas station. His best friend and coworker, Itsuki Takeuchi, the worst character in anime, is incredibly into cars and the street racing scene, hoping to join the local racing team, the Akina Speed Stars, once he gets his license and a car. Takumi, however, has next to no interest in racing, or even in cars themselves. He is the most apathetic human being about all of this you could possibly be, much to Itsuki's dismay, even though Itsuki refuses to admit it and drags him to all this stuff anyways. In fact, Takumi is what the 90s would have referred to as a space cadet. If there's a term you haven't heard in a while, he is often distracted and appears to be apathetic about not just cars and racing, but everything?
Wait, so I actually don't think I know this term. What does that mean?
His head's in the clouds.
He daydreams a lot. He is sort of spacey, that kind of thing. You've never heard the term space cadet?
I mean, I've heard of space cadet before, but never in this context.
Interesting. I don't know where I first heard it, but I've heard it quite a bit before.
I mean, I thought of maybe people who attended space camp. Remember space camp, 90s kids? That was a thing.
I never got to go to space camp.
I don't know what that is either.
What do you mean you don't know what space camp is?
You Midwesterners are weird.
It was a big prize on Nickelodeon shows.
I think you're making this up. This is a Midwest thing.
Whatever you want to say.
You goddamn coastal elites.
Look, just because we can still use the internet when our family's on Netflix.
Unbeknownst to Itsuki and his other friends, however, Takumi has spent the past 5 years making late-night deliveries for his father's tofu shop while using his father's, here we go, Panda 1983 Toyota Sprinter Trueno GT Apex AE86. Or, as the series refers to it, and as I will refer to it so as to never have to say that full name ever again, the 86.
Can you say that full name without looking at the paper?
God, no. And I'm not even gonna try.
Can you imagine the fans out there who are like, I can recite it by memory?
There are probably 5 people saying that right now. In an effort to get home faster, and this is canon, while keeping the tofu in the back undamaged, Takumi has become incredible at racing down the local mountain pass with extreme speed and precision.
Whoa, he's a rally boy.
When the Speed Stars are challenged by an experienced racing team called the Akagi Red Suns, led by a famous pair of street racers known as the Takahashi brothers, they desperately begin to search for the driver of an 8-6 that supposedly casually defeated the younger brother Keisuke on his way home from a practice run the night before. This investigation leads them to Takumi's father, Bunta, who was known to be one of the best street racers in the region in his younger years. Bunta agrees to maybe show up at the race, but sends Takumi to the race instead, dangling the promise of letting him use the car to take a girl on a date afterwards if he wins, because Takumi is a teenager, and there's a whole thing with a girl named Natsuki, and she's like the worst character in the show, and it ends after like the 3rd season. It's weird. Takumi, to everybody's surprise, because when he shows up, everybody's like, oh, we're screwed. We're screwed. Takumi destroys Keisuke Takahashi.
Well, yeah, he's the protagonist, so.
Pretty much. He crushes him, and when they ask, like, when did you get so good at racing? He's like, I just wanted to get home fast when doing deliveries. I was tired, and I wanted to go home.
That is a very powerful energy.
From there, Takumi gains a region-wide reputation as the legendary 8-6 of Akina, and people begin coming from all over to challenge him. The story follows Takumi as he goes from being apathetic about racing to truly gaining a passion for the sport, and aiming to become the number 1 driver not only in his region, but in all of Japan.
Do they take it worldwide, at least, if it lasted 16 years?
I don't think so, but they do. So in the 4th season, they start doing a thing where they go to other parts of Japan, and because the show is mainly about Japan's mountain racing scene, because that's just a scene that is if you've seen Tokyo Drift, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, a lot of people think that a lot of inspiration for that movie came from Initial D, but the inspiration for that movie is also just, that's kind of just a thing that happens in Japan because they have so many mountains and curvy roads.
This reminds me a lot of the when the Netflix Daredevil series was airing, and people were saying, like, you know, you got the Avengers fighting interdimensional alien threats, and here's Daredevil micromanaging the hell out of like 6 city blocks.
Pretty much. It's kind of like that. Like the first 2 seasons are just like in the Gunma region. and people showing up and being like, I want to race this 8-6. I can definitely beat him, because like it's a sports anime, so it's always, I can beat the protagonist. Oh no, I can't beat the protagonist. The anime ran for several seasons, though. There are 26 episodes of Initial D First Stage, produced by Studio Comet and Studio Gallop in 1998. 13 episodes of Second Stage, produced by Pastel in 1999. A film titled Third Stage, produced by Studio Dean in 2001.
Shout out to Dean. You'll hear about them later.
24 episodes of Fourth Stage, produced by ACGT between 2004 and 2006. I don't know why that season took so long to come out. Something must have happened in 2005 or something.
Yeah, it's like Kamen Rider time.
14 episodes of Fifth Stage, produced by Synergy SP in 2012. 4 episodes of Final Stage, produced by Synergy SP in 2014. And there are also 2 OVAs titled Extra Stage and Extra Stage 2. So, with that, this is where I will ask, gentlemen, what are your experiences with Initial D?
There are 3 songs on the soundtrack that have legendary meme status. I myself love Deja Vu memes, but that's literally the extent that I know about the show.
I believe that not more than believe. One time you movie nighted the First Stage movie, I think it was, with our friends.
One of them.
Okay.
There's a trilogy of 3 movies that retell First Stage, and I don't recommend them for reasons that I will get into later.
And yet you had us watch them.
I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know the reason. So there's a specific reason why I wouldn't recommend them, and I didn't know it was a thing until we watched it. But I have watched up to Fourth Stage in Initial D. I haven't even watched the whole damn show because Fifth Stage and Final Stage are not dubbed, and I was watching the dub. But I absolutely love the show. It's my favorite sports show of all time. This show is hype. It is awesome. Even if you don't care about racing or cars, it is super cool. And I definitely recommend it if you are looking for a high energy hype show to watch at any point. Never been a better time to watch anime.
Matt, favorite sports anime?
I would go with Run with the Wind. Aired, what was that, 2017 to 2018?
That would have been 2018 to 2019.
18 to 19, yeah. It's about track and field. Has one of the best casts I've ever seen in an ensemble series. And I had no affinity for track and field until I watched this show. And now it's like, boy, maybe I should have done something with my life when I was in high school.
It is a very good show. I have also watched that one. It's a very close second for me.
Interesting. I'll take 2000's Hajime no Ippo.
Yeah, I knew it.
As my favorite, it gave me the same kind of appreciation for boxing.
I have sort of the same relationship with Prince of Tennis, which would be on number 3. But Prince of Tennis is more like, what if tennis was Dragon Ball Z and everything?
What if tennis was a blood sport?
Pretty much. What if tennis was a fighting game?
Oh, that's Mario Tennis.
Mario Tennis has a lot more in common with Prince of Tennis than you realize. So, Initial D has, since its release, become one of the most iconic sports anime in history. Not just for its iconic Eurobeat soundtrack, but also just for its story and how completely pumped up it seems to be able to make any viewer. But it's also largely credited for the popularization of the Eurobeat genre in Japan. Like, that genre is huge, and it's largely considered to be entirely because of Initial D.
A lot of times I'll see, like, on YouTube, like, it's a Eurobeat version of a song, and every single time the thumbnail has the car from Initial D.
That's exactly, yeah, that's correct. It is also well known for being one of the first anime to incorporate computer-generated graphics alongside hand-drawn art. Unfortunately, this means that most of the races in First Stage look like they're being displayed on a PlayStation 1. But for the time, it was very impressive. It is not that impressive nowadays, but the music makes up for it, so it's fine.
Do they at least start looking like they're on a PS2?
Yeah, they get... So here's the thing. After First Stage, you can see the uptick in budget. You can see that they were given far more budget after that. It's the most visible I've ever seen a budget increase in an anime in my life. The first English dub for Initial D was done by Tokyopop, but it was met with backlash as they not only made extensive changes to the script, but also removed all of the Eurobeat.
That's illegal.
Come on.
They claimed that this was to, quote, Americanize the series so it could be aired on television, while at the same time keeping the Japanese spirit of the series.
Okay, so American, fine. Japanese, fine. Europe, get that out of here.
Not allowed. Interestingly, though, this was the most fascinating thing that I discovered. Tokyopop actually only released dubs of first and second stage, but supposedly a dub from Tokyopop of the third stage film exists. And it was apparently aired at Big Apple Anime Fest in 2003, and unlike the rest of the series that they had dubbed thus far, it retained the original soundtrack of the Japanese version. So they had learned and kept the Eurobeat in there. But after that airing at that convention, the movie was never mentioned by Tokyopop ever again, and was never released on DVD. And Tokyopop's distributor would go bankrupt very shortly after, and Funimation would gain distribution rights to Initial D 3 years later. And since then, Funimation has provided a much improved dub for everything up to fourth stage. That's what I watched. Though there is no word as to whether or not they are planning to produce a dub for fifth or final stage. Please just do it. I want to watch the rest of the series. Initial D has also spawned a series of 3 theatrical anime films that were mentioned earlier that retell the events of first stage, but once again, these cut out the Eurobeat. It should be illegal to make any type of Initial D media and not include Eurobeat.
That one sounds like it's some kind of licensing thing.
Probably. I don't know. Funimation didn't dub those, which is doubly weird. But Initial D also has a live action film that was released in 2005. Apparently there is a sequel that has been confirmed to be in production as far back as in 2013, though it has been considered to be in development hell since like 2006. And there are also 23 video games ranging from Game Boy and PS1 titles to arcade racers, with the most recent release being Initial D Arcade Stage 0 in 2017. And there's even a typing game. And one day I'm gonna play it, even though it assuredly is not in English.
You've got to step on the gas with your fingers.
Well, you've always wanted to learn how to type kanji, I assume.
Definitely, 100%. And that's all the information I really have for you on the show itself. So let's get into the musician that I want to focus on for this episode, or this section, I guess, being Dave Rodgers. So Dave Rodgers was born Giancarlo Pacchini. I hope I said that right.
Giancarlo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Damn it! Giancarlo Pacchini. Damn it.
Pacchini.
I said Pacchini. You can't prove otherwise, except for on the
Check
recording.
the tapes.
He was born on February 21st, 1963 in Mantua, Italy. And he is a long-running contributor to the Super Eurobeat series, which is a series of compilation CDs released in Japan that went for 250 volumes of just Eurobeat. He began going by Dave Rodgers in 2006 when he released his album Blow Your Mind, which incorporated more rock elements into his songs than before. But he has also gone by several other aliases that I could find, such as The Big Brother, Raymond Berry, Chester, Dr. Money, Patrick Hooley, Tommy J, Manzi Bellini, Billy Mappy, Paul Murray, Redskins, Mario Ross, RCS, Robert Stone, and Roby Benvenuto. I feel like, you ever seen that Key and Peele skit of the college football team?
Yes. Dun, 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 dun.
And they all have like the most ridiculous names. That's what that felt like.
TJ Waxin Flaxin.
But I guess Dave Rodgers is the one that stuck for whatever reason.
That should have been Dr. Money.
It should have been Dr. Money.
I can't imagine why.
Should have been Dr. Money or Billy Mappy. Or just Chester.
I like Robbie Benvenuto.
Robbie Benvenuto is really good, too. Initial D is the only anime that he seems to have contributed to when it comes to anime. That doesn't surprise me at all. That's just the one. Other than that, it's just albums and singles, and he mainly just seemed to put music on Super Eurobeat albums. As for some historical development research for Initial D, the actual background music of the series was done for first, second, and third stage by Ryuichi Katsumata, and fourth, fifth, and final stage by Atsushi Umebori. But as this series is heavily known for Eurobeat, a lot of which was provided by Mr. Rodgers, that's why we are using him as our subject this week. So enough talking about Eurobeat and cool soundtracks. Let's listen to some of it. With our 5 critical tracks, the first one being Dogfight. This is the OP for Initial D 4th Stage, written and performed by Move, that is M.O.V.E. And hey yo, this song is rad. This is my favorite OP in the series. Those MIDI violins somehow end up being the coolest thing in the world. And just both of the vocalists of Move absolutely kill this song. And every time I listen to the song, I think about like how hype the races are in Initial D. All of the YouTube comments, if you look at any video of this song, is just like, be careful not to listen to this song in your car or you will get pulled over for speeding. And it's the best OP the series has had, at least of the ones I've seen. Please, please dub the last 2 seasons Funimation, I beg you.
Yeah, it's super hype. I like the idea of this group, Move, but however you want to say it. But having the male and female vocalist gives it a nice touch. And yet, the violins, good touch. I dig this one a lot. Good call.
It feels like JRPG boss battle to me a little bit.
I could hear this in a Persona game.
I don't know if I'd hear it in Persona, but like the instrumental like is just like if you take out the vocals, you just pop it into any JRPG and no one will question it. But the vocals like do add a certain like extra intimidating quality to it.
I want another console Initial D game and I want this song to be in it and to be like the final race. That would be awesome. For number 2 on the Critical 5, we have Project D. Now, this one's not one of the race songs, nor is it an OP. This is actually just a piece of the background music from 4th Stage, composed by Atsushi Umebori, and it usually plays during the build-up to the next race starting, or when Ryosuke Takahashi, the lead of the group Project D in 4th Stage, is giving a briefing about the upcoming race, basically sitting down and saying, here's what I want you to do, here's what you can expect in this race, etc., etc. This song always gets me majorly pumped up for the race that's about to start. It is my favorite piece of regular background music in the series, and I had to put it on this list because it just has that intense feeling that I crave when I watch Initial D.
It's got a lot of tension building through it. Like this is a things are about to happen kind of song.
If we're talking about, like, could maybe fit into Persona, I get backside of the TV vibes from Persona 4.
Yeah, I mean, they fill very much the same role, I think.
Mm-hmm. Little bit. You just gotta throw in some rapping in there, and you've got it.
The last one had good vocals. Where's the vocals on this one? Just send this song to Lotus Juice.
Oh my god, if Lotus Juice rapped over this song, I would die. I would die in real life. I wonder if Lotus Juice is an Initial D fan. Maybe one day I'll get to ask him, and he'll say no. Number 3, let's get into the stuff that everybody knows. Because this is the first of the ones that everybody knows. It's Running in the 90s. This is by Maurizio De Giorgio. This is the one that everybody knows. One of 2 that everybody knows on my Critical 5, I guess. Probably one of 3. Man, I don't know at this point. All I know is that this was the first song I ever heard from Initial D, and I didn't hear it in Initial D.
This is one of those songs where it's like I've known the song for so much of my life.
Oh, yeah.
That like once you learn where it comes from, your brain just kind of rejects it. Like that came from somewhere. It doesn't just exist in the ether as its own thing.
Exactly. So I think the first time I heard this song, I kid you not, was in The Internet Is for Music.
That late, really?
Yeah. I might have heard it in like some YouTube videos before that.
Let me tell you a little thing about a website called YTMND.
Yeah, boy.
I didn't go to YTMND ever.
It's probably for the best. I could not tell you to this day why it was an entertaining website. But it's I guess just one of those like proto-internet things where it's like the reason that it's funny is that nothing like this could have ever existed before, and that's all we needed. But like Running in the 90s was all over YTMND.
Oh my god, yeah.
That sounds about right. It is, as far as I know, the first song that hit meme status from Initial D.
Back then, memes were called fads.
Oh god. This song, in terms of the actual anime, shows up in first stage during Takumi's race with Keisuke Takahashi, so his first real race. But it plays again during his race with Takeshi Nakazato of the Miyogi Night Kids. And look, outside of it being the meme song, this is the speed song. This song is speed, given form, and turned into a song.
Well, it's the first example here of, actual Eurobeat.
Yeah. Exactly. The next 3 are actually all Eurobeat. Because that's where the soundtrack has to go from here. And speaking of, number 4 is Gas, Gas, Gas. Song is by Manuel, and gentlemen, I have a question for you. Do you like My Car? I haven't actually heard where this song plays in the show because, while I've heard it outside of the show, this song apparently appears in 5th Stage, and again, I haven't seen that series yet.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of the sort of underground meme status songs from this series, but it is gaining speed, pun absolutely intended. Yeah, it's a good one.
This one I'm not sure I've heard before, if I'm being honest.
I hadn't heard it until very recently. Actually, my transition song is the first time I ever heard this song. But yeah, apparently though, something I did find that was very interesting, this song did not show up in the anime first. It showed up in the game Initial D Arcade Stage 5, and then only appeared in the show afterwards.
Odd.
Yeah, that's really weird. So technically this song is from the game before it's from the show. But this song also rules. Like, the chorus of this song is so rad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's so great. I wish I could understand what they were saying most of the rest of the song. I could say that about all of these, honestly. But none of them are as big meme status, I think, not recently, not today, as fifth critical track, the most famous thing to come out of Initial D, Deja Vu.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before. Higher on the street, and I know it's my time to go. Going new, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard when I try to be me. Whoa, deja vu, I just been in this time before. Higher on the beat, and I know it's a place to go. Going new, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard when I try to be me.
This one is by Dave Rodgers. And this is the song everybody knows. Everybody knows this one. When you think about Initial D, most people, unless they don't know what Initial D is, in which case they probably still know this song, they just don't know it's from Initial D. This is the song they think about. Which is weird, because as far as I can tell, this song plays exactly one time in the entire series.
What?
It plays in second stage during Takumi's race with a rival 8-6 driver named Wataru Akiyama. That is the only time, according to the Initial D wiki, that this song plays ever.
That's odd. Isn't this one kind of like the entire idea behind the meme that it's from Initial D?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Crazy drifts.
Like, the video that I am most familiar with that uses this song is that video of the icy road and people like realizing that there's something blocking the road too late, and they come onto screen and the song starts up and they start like trying to turn to go around it, and then they don't quite make it and they hit something, and then 2 seconds later another car does the same thing.
The chorus keeps restarting. Deja vu, deja vu, deja vu.
That video is so good. This song is awesome, though. I am as shocked as you guys are to realize that even though I'm pretty sure I knew somewhere deep down that this song only plays during one race.
I don't think I believe you.
One race in the season that aired in 1999. Like, it's not even a recent one. So, for Cutting Room Floor, Matt, you got 2. Hit me with those first.
So, my first song on the cutting room floor is Space Boy. According to you, this one is by Dave Rodgers. It doesn't sound anything like this song, but it occupies the same space in my mind as NSYNC's Space Cowboy.
Yes.
Like a 90s song that has like the general theme of talking about space without any real idea what space is. And it's a banger.
I don't think I'm familiar with that song at all somehow.
If you wanna fly.
Okay, I'm familiar with that song, actually, now that you sing that one bar.
Well, come and take a ride. Take a space ride with the cowboy, baby.
According to the Initial D wiki, this song is actually the first Eurobeat song you hear in the entire series.
Nice. I made the right choice.
Far as I can tell, it plays in first stage when Keisuke Takahashi is being beaten by the mysterious 8-6 in the first episode.
Good pick.
The second song that I chose is My Only Star. This one I have, like, some strong retroactive nostalgia for. Like, I've never heard it before, as far as I can tell, but yet it has that feeling of, like, oh yes, I know this. This is comfortable and familiar.
Sure.
I don't know, there's just something about, like, the general sound and tone of the song, where it's like, maybe it just very closely matches something else that I know.
As far as I can tell, this one is also from first stage. It seems to play when Takumi is about to race Nakazato, who I mentioned earlier as being the second time that Running in the 90s plays in the series. As for me, I have two songs on the cutting room floor, the first one being Around the World.
秒速で伝わる時代でもチョイスの仕方がわからないマネキャンバマンラブなんてのんきなやつにレディアート3回マニュアル通りにただ抱き愛がないことに気がつかない窒息する前に叫ぼうぜ Oh in the midnight dream 熱い想いを抑えきれずに
This one is the very first OP of the show, also by Move. And that rapping though, man, it's so good. The OP actually happens with the part with the information. I'll never be able to rap that part. It's in Japanese and rap. I can barely rap in English.
Anime songs with rap are, like, really good. There's not enough of them.
I agree.
Asterisk from Bleach comes to mind. Yeah, good first OP choices.
Asterisk is good stuff. As for the other one, it's Night of Fire. Song is by Dream. It is one of my favorite Eurobeat songs in the show, but I don't think it's as iconic as the three that I had on the list before. It plays in first stage during Takumi's race in the rain with Kenta Nakamura of the Akagi Red Suns.
The YouTube comments on this one feel like I'm staring into another universe.
Please provide some examples.
London in 1666 exists. A baker's oven. And then that's the whole comment.
What?
The toy car you got that says made in Japan. Me calls cat by name. Cat ignores. Me, pss, 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 cat. And that's the whole comment. And finally, has anybody actually watched Initial D? That's a real question.
That's a good question. Yeah, that song is awesome. And wow, that sounds like a wonderful comment section. I didn't actually look down there. So what will I never forget about this show? I think that everybody should give this show a try, regardless of whether or not you care about cars or racing. Because I certainly do not give one inkling of caring for cars or racing, and yet I absolutely adore Initial D. This show rules, the soundtrack rules, the characters except for Itsuki rule, and it's just a great show. Funimation, please dub the last two seasons.
At the very least, I'm going to watch more Deja Vu meme compilations tonight.
That is also acceptable.
Perhaps one day I'll watch it, but then, like, you tell me, oh, this was relevant for, like, 15 years. That sounds like a commitment.
Only kind of. It's not like we're talking about One Piece here.
True. Yeah, big gaps.
So, for our transition, we like to, just like with our video games, we like to highlight a fan remix or cover. And I really had no other choice but to grab Tsuko G. If you remember him, he originally got famous for doing the Smash Wii U theme on Kazoo. He used to do the Kazooed series. He has since stopped that.
No, was that him?
That was him. He does other, like, really cool covers now, and one of them was of Gas, Gas, Gas. So please enjoy that. And we'll be right back.
I wanna race for you. Psycho now. Gas, gas, gas. I'm gonna step on the gas tonight and be a lover. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll be so quick as a flash. I'll be your hero. Gas, gas, gas. I'm gonna run as a flash tonight to be the winner.
So we go from cars going down the Japanese mountainside to spaceships across the solar system. It's time to talk about Cowboy Bebop, one of the legendary anime soundtracks of all time. Had to talk about this one, at least somewhere on this initial anime music installment of original Soundchat. So Cowboy Bebop aired on TV Tokyo from April 3rd, 1998 to June 26th, 1998. This run was unusual because it had an original 6 p.m. time slot, and the show has graphic violence. So only certain episodes were aired. Like, they just jumped from, like, episode 2 was first, and then 5, and then 7 through 15, and then, like, jumping here and there. So a full rebroadcast in Japan eventually aired on the satellite network WoW WoW from October 24th, 1998 to April 24th, 1999. This aired in the United States starting on September 2nd, 2001, and that's a notable date because this was the debut of Cartoon Network's Adult Swim programming, and thus made it the first anime to be broadcast on Adult Swim.
The OG.
That's right, before Toonami hit. Then it hit the UK in 2002 as a highlight of the short-lived Cartoon Network for Adults channel CNX.
Wait, what? That was a thing?
I guess so. I think it was a Turner joint. So
weird.
Must have been.
Well, I mean, it was a UK thing, so I'm not very surprised we wouldn't know about it.
Right.
Fair.
But we have UK fans out there, so if that rings a bell, Cowboy Bebop is based on the 2-volume manga Cowboy Bebop Shooting Star by Hajime Yatate. The anime was developed by Sunrise and directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, who is also known for directing Samurai Champloo, Space Dandy, and the recent Carol and Tuesday. Cowboy Bebop is a neo-noir space western about bounty hunters traveling the solar system to make a living while confronting their personal demons. It has recurring thematic focal points of the boredom of adulthood, loneliness, and the difficulties of trying to escape one's past. I think a reviewer put it most aptly when they described it as space opera meets noir meets comedy meets cyberpunk. It is a mishmash unlike anything I think anime has ever seen, and it's well remembered for it. The overall plot involves the fact that it's 2071, and humanity has colonized most of the rocky planets and moons in the solar system. The Intersolar System Police, or ISSP, has set up a legalized contract system in which registered bounty hunters, or cowboys, can chase criminals and bring them in alive for a return of a bounty, of a reward, cash, woolongs. So the series protagonists are bounty hunters, and they're working from the spaceship Bebop, so Cowboy Bebop. And it consists of Spike Spiegel, who is an exiled former hitman of the criminal Red Dragon Syndicate, and Jet Black, a former ISSP officer. They are later joined by Faye Valentine, who's an amnesiac con artist, Edward Wong, an eccentric girl who's skilled in hacking, and Ein, a genetically engineered Pembroke Welsh corgi with human-like intelligence. Fortunately, Ein does not talk.
Thank God.
As the crew goes on eccentric and dangerous adventures in search of that almighty Woolong currency, they'll confront each of their pasts, But none of these are more dangerous than Spike's rivalry with a man named Vicious and an affair with a woman named Julia. That said, gentlemen, what are our experiences with Cowboy Bebop?
Well, I reviewed a video game for NWR once that had a trailer that was just a ripoff of the OP.
I do remember that. That was something.
I remember that, yeah.
That's about as much as I've got there.
On my end, it is one of my favorite anime of all time. I own it. I own the entire series on DVD. Somehow found it for a reasonable price at a Best Buy a couple years ago. It is one of like 3 shows I own on DVD. And I have watched it several times. I even have a concept for like an audio drama that is inspired heavily by Cowboy Bebop that I hope to be able to write one day when I get my life together. So don't expect it ever. But no, Cowboy Bebop is awesome. It is super well written. It is one of those shows on the list of like, if you watch anime, you kind of owe it to yourself to at least give Cowboy Bebop a shot.
Oops.
And I feel like it's even a good entry point for those who don't watch anime, because like it is up there with legendary status. And it has been too long since I had my last viewing of Cowboy Bebop, but I've seen the series probably a few times. It's up there among my favorites for sure. But I end up remembering the soundtrack far more than the individual plots here and there, because the way Cowboy Bebop's story is structured, it's only 26 episodes. And these episodes are titled as sessions. So honestly, for the key crux of the story and, what is the deal with Spike Spiegel, who's, it's really like the through line through it all. Honestly, only episodes are sessions. 5, 12, 13, 25, and 26 are like the big ones. These are titled Ballad of Fallen Angels, Jupiter Jazz Part 1 and Part 2, and The Real Folk Blues Part 1 and Part 2. Like, that's the main story for Spike. The rest of these episodes are these random bounty jobs, random shenanigans, and, hits that they're going after, and occasionally you'll get character backstory filled in there.
They all have like various tones to them depending on who the episode focuses on. So like Jet's episodes are a lot darker than say Ed's episode. Or Spike's episodes and stuff like that. And so I think it's really interesting in that it is a show of very, very varying tones, and somehow it works incredibly well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like it is the Spike episodes that everyone remembers for the big moments and the through line of what, if there's one consistent story that the anime is trying to tell, it is Spike's tale. This is like the second episode in a row where Lupin III is brought up as an inspiration, because that character was an inspiration to the director Watanabe, especially when it came to trying to make Spike cool. And I think what's arguably most impressive about this series is how it stayed very self-contained. There is a movie, of course, but it's not like, oh, and we're doing remaking the anime again, or the second season of Cowboy Bebop, or Cowboy Bebop Origins. Like, no, it's very self-contained. And this was purposeful because Watanabe did not want this series to become his Star Trek, where he was tied to doing it for years and years and years. But Cowboy Bebop is consistently in the top 5 of lists of the best anime series. And it's often usually fighting with that number 1 spot, usually with Neon Genesis Evangelion. But honestly, I think Cowboy Bebop is the best dub in Western anime history. Like, it's honestly incredible.
I would agree. It is definitely up there. Bloom as Spike is one of the best performances, like, just in general.
Wendy Lee is Faye, Bo Billingsley is Jet. Like, it's so good that, like, I can't even imagine the sub version of the show.
I don't think I've ever heard how any of those characters sounded Japanese.
Yeah. Well, I think Megumi Hayashibara, whatever her name is, well-known Japanese seiyuu, won awards for her performance as Faye. So like she's a notable standout for her performance in the sub version. But it's an iconic dub, especially when in the early 2000s, like it really introduced a new audience of adolescents and even adults to what anime can be in the West. And it was just a big inspiration there. But there has been some legacy for Cowboy Bebop beyond the series. Cowboy Bebop the movie, which is also known as Cowboy Bebop Knockin' on Heaven's Door, released in Japan in September 2001 and in the United States in 2003. It's a good film. It adds more great music, and some of which we'll touch on here. There were also 2 Cowboy Bebop video games that I had no idea existed because they were Japan-only releases. The first of which, 1998's Cowboy Bebop, is literally an attempt at Star Fox 64 on the PlayStation. It even has characters from the series popping in to chime in as Spike hunts down bounties in the Swordfish 2.
Does John Raritan know about this?
I'm not sure.
Time to make sure he does.
Would he want to play it even though it's on PlayStation?
I think it's more a question of would he want to play it even though it's anime.
Right. It's a game that's published by Bandai, as is 2005's Cowboy Bebop Suyoku no Serenade. This is a third-person beat-em-up and shooter, just action game overall, on PlayStation 2. It was apparently planned for a North American release, but this was around the time where Bandai merged with Namco, and it apparently did not survive this process.
What the hell? I had absolutely no idea either of those existed either. Wow.
Look up footage on YouTube. It's amusing, to say the least. A film for Cowboy Bebop, a live-action film, that is, has apparently been in development hell since 2008. Originally rumored to star Keanu Reeves as Spike Spiegel. Instead, now it's a live-action Netflix series that is gaining the development focus for Cowboy Bebop. The revealed cast includes John Cho as Spike, Danielle Pineda as Faye, Mustafa Shakir as Jet, Alex Hessel as Vicious, and Elena Satine as Julia. Now, they were working on production, shooting, and all that, but it was delayed after an onset knee injury to Cho. And then now current events probably don't help it either. So I think they were originally hoping for maybe a late 2020 release, but 21 at the earliest, all things considered, to be honest.
I don't think 20's happening.
I'd say most live-action things are going to be delayed for a while.
Mm-hmm. The soundtrack to Cowboy Bebop is especially famous, though, and that is all because of the composer Yoko Kanno. Yoko Kanno was born on March 18th, 1964 in Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture, Japan. Her parents exposed her only to classical music as a child, and she took naturally to the keyboard and the piano. Sorry, Joe, no mention of electones and things like that.
Can't add it to the list.
We're always on the lookout for those Japanese composers. But eventually, her focus shifted elsewhere, and she ended up studying literature at Waseda University. But she was apparently exposed to rhythm and like a drum beat for the first time by a friend who played the drums in a school band.
Boy, it's impressive if she got that long never hearing a drum beat before.
She said, quote, "I thought my friend was a genius. I had heard drums on the radio before, but it was like I had never really noticed them. Then I see drums performed live and was able to experience a beat for the first time. I started to take away heavy interest in music that wasn't classical and joined the band elective."
Okay, I was just like joking, but maybe she actually never heard a drum beat before then.
Those must have been some really, really good, like, that must have been one hell of a drum part.
Or maybe just someone was doing like a drum solo or something like that. It's unusual. It seems like a overall sheltered life. And then her musical tastes ballooned because like she's well known for tapping into all of these different genres. And it's kind of amazing to think that like that was the foundation. She appeared on the music scene as the keyboardist for the band Tetsu 100%. And while she was still at Waseda, the Japanese video game company Koei asked her to compose the soundtrack to a Nobunaga's Ambition game while she was still there. And like, that's a pull. She started the project known as The Seatbelts as its keyboardist and frontwoman specifically for the Cowboy Bebop project. And she also goes by the pseudonym Gabriella Robin for vocals and lyrics on certain songs on this soundtrack. For example, there's the song Cats on Mars that some may be familiar with. That's her singing under this pseudonym of Gabriella Robin. This was not known that it was Yoko Kanno until 2009.
Damn.
Apparently, she's also a rather eccentric personality because apparently the character of Edward was influenced by the antics of Yoko Kanno, as observed by Shinichiro Watanabe when he first met her.
No, Ed cannot be based on a real human being. I cannot accept that.
Right? It's kind of amazing to think that, like, oh, that's partially inspired by the composer?
No, that I can't process that. There can't be a human being like that in real life. There can't.
But she's still doing great work. She even composed a 3-movement suite recently entitled Ray of Water for the ascension of Emperor Naruhito. It was performed for him and Empress Masako at the enthronement celebration on November 9th, 2019 in Japan.
Well, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. So she's notable. All right. And she also enjoys photography and writing as hobbies on the side. So some of the anime that she has composed for that I particularly have heard of include Macross Plus, Escaflowne, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, Darker Than Black, and Space Dandy. Some video games, not as big into the video game scene, but like the original Romance of the Three Kingdoms game. So that's also kind of a big deal. Some Nobunaga's Ambition games, the Cowboy Bebop games, ill-fated as they were, and Ragnarok Online 2. But definitely more of an anime composer. When it came to Cowboy Bebop's soundtrack itself, all music composed by Yoko Kanno and performed by the Seatbelts, her group. Genres range from straightforward big band jazz, blues, acoustic ballads, hard rock, country, funk, electronic, hip-hop, and experimental compositions and elements. Like, it's all over the place. Most of these songs are instrumental. They play as background music within the show, but some numbers are accompanied by singers, ranging in languages from Japanese, English, to even French. Now, music production on Cowboy Bebop began very early, even before most of the pre-production elements. Watanabe let Kanno really just compose to the beat of her own drum. She was sometimes surprised ultimately at how some of her pieces were used, and she wished maybe they could have been used elsewhere, but she also felt that none of those uses were inappropriate by any means. Ultimately, Kanno's pieces inspired story beats for the writers. And while Watanabe notes that, especially when this was done in the second half of the series, that this is a method that's unforgivable and unacceptable, it was ultimately a big hit with Cowboy Bebop. The Cowboy Bebop fandom wiki also notes a small paragraph that references how Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts are an in-universe thing in the world of Cowboy Bebop. So if you'll indulge me here, quote, Yoko Kanno, often referred to as simply YK, led the band The Seatbelts starting in 2048, and the band immediately took off in popularity. She wrote all the tracks. Despite this, little information about her remained into 2071. What little information remained suggested she was a former pro wrestler, a stellar babe, and totally feline.
Okay.
So,
I guess.
Joe, does it seem like maybe the Edward personality traits might start to ring a little true?
Yes, but I don't want to admit it.
Also, a fun little fact thing, the eye catches, which are the small little musical jingles that play in, before and after commercial breaks in anime, usually in the middle. For whatever reason, these jingles are titled the vitamins in the world of Cowboy Bebop. So what does this soundtrack sound like? Let's get into the 5 critical tracks for Cowboy Bebop. First off, it's Tank. I feel like if there is one song that everybody knows that a song had to be here for Cowboy Bebop, it is Tank.
I mean, even I know it.
Yeah, exactly, right? So this is the opening for the entire series.
One of the best OPs ever made.
Honestly, yeah. So much so that I guess a video game had to rip it off.
You know, they ripped off more than the OP, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, no. So, Tank features male vocals by Tim Jensen as he speaks in his low voice at the beginning, and also an extensive sax solo by Masato Honda. It is a big band jazz piece that uses a Latin-infused hard bop style with a rhythm section that mixes a double bass and bongo drums. Sure, Wiki, whatever you say. I feel like the most notable thing about this, as far as its presence in pop culture, this made rounds on the internet around this time. In 2016, at the Canadian National Figure Skating Championships, a figure skating solo routine by Kevin Reynolds used Tank as the musical number. And Reynolds even dressed as Spike Spiegel during his routine.
I don't think I've ever seen this, and I'm going to need to go watch it the instant we're done.
It's kind of amazing. This one also really rings true to me because when I was in high school jazz band, I looked up a MIDI arrangement and fine-tuned it down so that my high school jazz band could play Tank at a concert. And so I have a deep fondness and affection for this song.
I love this song. Like I said, one of the best OPs ever made, just in general. Even I've played this in my car before, and my mother, was starting to whistle alongside it. It's such a good song. It's such a cool OP. I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together.
3, 2, 1. Let's jam. And on to the next one, number 2 on the Critical 5. This is Rush. Rush takes place during a couple action scenes in the first episode, and so it kind of has a sound that's overall arranged pretty similarly to Tank to kind of establish this big band sound for Cowboy Bebop before they really start deviating further. There's an awesome trombone solo in this version by Yoichi Murata. And I personally, though, if I had to pick one, I put this on the Critical 5 just because of its importance to the series and just setting a tone, setting a musical tone. But if I had to pick, I like the sound of New York Rush or NY Rush better. This is a version that is more solo, free-formed, adds some electric piano. So like a personal favorite of mine throughout the whole series. And it even plays in episode 3 and episode 19. But I feel like Rush, to kind of get like an action scene going with this kind of frenetic pace has to be here.
It starts out sounding a lot like kind of this sort of song that you would hear like at a jazz club or something like that, like diegetically. And then it sort of slowly transitions into like basically a James Bond action scene.
Yeah. I could also almost see the opening flurry being like, almost, we keep talking about JRPG music, like getting into a random battle.
There might be a reason for that.
This is definitely like the second song I always hear people talk about. When it comes to the background music, at least. I think another one of these is more often the second song people talk about. But in terms of just raw soundtrack, this is the second one I hear mentioned most of the time. And I think there's a reason for that. I forgot that it plays during the action scenes in the first episode. I remember that first episode very clearly, but not the sound, apparently.
Yeah, it's just a really strong piece. And I felt like I was hemming and hawing between a whole bunch of them. And it's just like, this one, it's got to be here. This next one's more of a personal choice, though, and it's an odd duck one. But I feel like one that is good to mention on the Critical 5 here. Number 3, Mushroom Hunting. This plays in the psychedelic and quirky episode 17, Mushroom Samba.
One of the most famous episodes in the show.
Vocals on this one by Tulivu Donna Cumberbatch. No word if related to Benedict. But this song really just slowly builds just from a bass part to adding vocals to the conga drums to saxes and solos, and it just builds overall to a crescendo. I'm especially fond of this song since I liked to use it for a segment on an old podcast, so it's your turn.
Have you guys ever played the old Nintendo 64 game Rush 2 Extreme Racing USA?
No.
Yes, actually.
So this song sounds strikingly similar to the song that plays when like you're entering your name for a high score at the end of a level.
I will take your word for it. I don't remember that. It's been a very long time. I remember you using this as a transition song for a segment on that show because I remember not realizing that it was from Bebop somehow, despite the fact that I had watched Bebop at that point. And then I think years later, I was listening to the Bebop soundtrack just at work or something, and then I heard the "It's Your Turn," and I was like, "Wait, what?" It was a moment, to be sure.
But yeah, I think it just shows like not everything's crazy jazz. There's certainly some jazz, but you're starting to dip in some different genres here, and that's the mastery of Yoko Kanno.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 on the Critical 5. Gotta mention the Real Folk Blues.
乾いた瞳で誰か泣いてくれ The real folk blues 本当の悲しみが知りたいだけ泥の
Vocals by Mai Yamane, lyrics by Yuho Iwasato. This is the ending theme for just about every episode in the series, except for episode 13 and 26, which are like the mid-series and the series finale. The Real Folk Blues shares its name with a compilation album of the music of American blues singer and musician Muddy Waters, who is often cited as the father of modern Chicago blues. In fact, when you translate the lyrics to the chorus, it works out as, "The real folk blues, I only want to know what true sadness is. Sitting in muddy water isn't such a bad life if it ends after the first time. So I don't know, I had that sort of deep connection to an American blues legend, but even tying it in with muddy water, that's super interesting. Joe, at least, this has to be here. It's a classic. See you, Space Cowboy. You're going to carry that weight. Ending theme.
Very much so. This is, I don't think it's one of the best EDs of all time, but it is definitely one of the best ED songs of all time, if that makes sense. Because there's a difference between the ED as the video and song put together, because there's not really much of a video that goes with it, if I remember correctly.
Right, yeah.
But it is like, this song is fantastic. I will always remember where it plays in the last episode, which I will not give any spoilers, but it has this really, really good section in that episode. Fantastic song. Absolutely love it.
And for the music theory kids out there, it's in the key of F sharp minor, which is an odd one.
Yeah.
To wrap up the Critical 5, we'll wrap up with Blue.
Don't wake me from the dream. It's really everything it seemed. I'm so free. No black and white.
So Blue is the last song that you hear in the series, and it sure ends a certain way. So this opens with a chorus sung by Soichiro Otsuka and Gabriella Robin, which, hey, that's Yoko Kanno with that dual chorus there. But the main vocals of the song, once again, Mai Yamane. So it is the ending theme for the series finale, episode 26. And yeah, it's just that final impression. What is a slowly building rock tune that just leaves things on an optimistic note, I'd say, overall.
This has a feeling like, I've never even watched the show, but just like the feeling that this track gives is like very powerful.
Yeah, it's heavy.
I think a lot of people like kind of forget about this song. I think it gets overshadowed by Real Folk Blues for the most part. I certainly actually forgot about it until we started setting up for this show. And I listened to it again for the first time in a while. And I think that's unfortunate because it's a really good song. And especially given the context of how Bebop ends, just absolutely fantastic.
It definitely hits you. It's powerful. And this is in the key of G sharp minor. There you go. Thank you, Wiki. Thank you, fandom. Let's get to tracks on the cutting room floor. Joe, you're up first.
I got two. I wanted to bring a little bit more of the Western flair that I actually really like about the Bebop soundtrack into the cutting room floor. So my first song is Don't Bother None.
He dropped his wallet, now it's mine. Sorry, old man, but that's just the way that it is. Don't bother none. Won't have it all to worry about it.
This song is featured in episodes 1, 6, and 24. Vocals by Mai Yamane. And I don't know, something about this song always gets me. It's one of the songs on the soundtrack that I actually like to put on and just sort of sing along to. It has inspired a couple of scenes in the audio drama that I talked about earlier, this song specifically. And I don't know, it's one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack.
There's a very clear line that could be drawn between this and how much you love Supergiant.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's a really good point.
I wonder if Darren Korb is a Bebop fan.
I wonder. It's a really good point to bring up the Western bit, because there are so many genres here, and it's important to bring that up. So thank you for doing so.
My second song is Gotta Knock a Little Harder.
The more that I know, the harder I get, the harder I get, the harder I know to just go. Break through the door, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. A little harder, harder. You gotta hurry, you gotta break through the door.
This song is actually not from the series. It is from the movie. Plays in the final scene before transitioning into the end credits. The vocals are by Mayamane, and this is another one of those songs that I just really, really like. I've actually only seen the movie once. I think I got it from the library in like 2014. That was the first time I ever saw it. That's the only time I've seen it, and I really got to rewatch it because I haven't seen it since.
After seeing it within the last 6 months to a year, yeah, it's a powerful ending. I think it's a good choice.
I especially just really like the part where it just drops everything and she just starts singing the "Gotta Knock a Little Harder." That's my favorite part of the song. It's such a good song. I love this song.
So I got two. Like I said, I've never seen this. I have no real context for any of these. But just from skimming through the soundtrack, the first one that I found was Bad Dog, No Biscuits. This one I feel like it's from an alternate universe where this is the soundtrack to a Scooby-Doo chase, but in this universe, Scooby-Doo actually has a killer soundtrack.
It's actually super funny you mentioned this. This song was almost going on a Critical 5. So this comes from the second episode where they're trying to find this data dog, who is Ein the Corgi. And they're literally running after dogs when this plays.
Sick.
It's great, but it's kind of amazing you pulled Scooby-Doo out of all that. I totally agree, but it's a good pull.
I mean, the title of the track may have helped a little bit.
Sure, but even still.
The second track that I selected was Pot City. This is dungeon music from Pokemon Coliseum. I don't take constructive criticism.
100%. And this one plays in episodes 2 and 14. Not a famous one, but I'm glad it caught your ear specifically in that regard.
Yeah, I like the feel of it a lot. There's like some kind of aesthetic that like I'm trying to capture with words that I can feel in this one. And it's a very particular feeling, but I don't really know how to put it to words. My first thought was like kind of like detective stuff like LA Noire, but it doesn't quite fit that setting.
Yeah, no, you're right. Pokemon Coliseum is perfect. Like ominous groove, maybe?
Something like that.
Sure.
So my two, I'm going to go back to the Cowboy Bebop movie. I'm going to talk about What Planet Is This? Ba-da-da-da-ba-ba-bow. What a hit. Just those little vocals that chime in are perfect. Plays in the main action scene in that Cowboy Bebop movie. With backing vocals from Mayamane, Mayu Jensen, Tim Jensen, Mataro Misawa, and a sax solo by Masato Honda. I feel like my brother tried to bring this one to his jazz band, so I also resonate with this one super hard. But yeah, it's a just great big band vibe. Just wanted to get another one in there. A lot of people forget this one because it's from the movie, but it has really good energy.
I agree. I forgot about this one because it's from the movie, but hearing it again, yeah, no, this song rules.
Yeah, this one's just like, it's jamming. This one sounds just like really cool.
And for a totally different vibe, my other one here is Goodnight Julia. You want to talk about like huge rainy mood vibes? Like put that rainy mood website mashup with this one. Yeah, big time here. This plays in episodes 12 and 13, Jupiter Jazz Part 1 and 2. Kind of like the mid-series big moments with Spike and Julia. Tenor sax really starting off, the piano coming in, and it just builds, and it's beautiful. Just gorgeous. I feel like Cowboy Bebop has these moments on its soundtrack where it's like, yeah, it's exciting energy, but also just gorgeous music.
I can almost like see like the lo-fi tunes to study to, girl.
Except it's Ed, and she's not lo-fi, but the song is. This is also the song that the guy is playing in the episode, isn't it?
Yes,
like
I think
canonically,
so.
Somebody is on a stage playing this song when you first hear it.
Diegetically.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, but I mean, it was so difficult to narrow this soundtrack down. I had a whole list for a long time. So for me, shouts out to American Money, Too Good, Too Bad, Waltz for ZZ, Piano Black, Rain, Memory, Sax Quartet, and like that's honestly just scratching the surface.
Yeah, for me, it was also really hard to only pick 2 songs for the cutting room floor, because Waltz for ZZ is up there for me as well, like one of my favorite songs on the soundtrack.
Well, another huge super giant vibe song with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I also really like Digging My Potato, Spooky Dokie, Call Me, and Space Lion a lot.
So what will I never forget about Cowboy Bebop? I feel like there are series that just mean more to me personally that I'll watch more frequently or I'll just have more fond memories of. I mean, Yu Yu Hakusho, Full Metal Alchemist, Brotherhood. We mentioned Hajime no Ippo as a sports anime, but this is like GOAT level, like greatest of all time on that level, especially when it comes to anime soundtracks. And so I feel like it had to be mentioned specifically on this episode.
So for me, this is one of the few shows where if I am asked, hey, what is your favorite episode? I can name the episode. So I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite episode of Cowboy Bebop that you can name off the top of your head?
See, that's the thing. It's been too long, but if I think I have to pick one, Ballad of Fallen Angels.
For me, it is Waltz for Venus, and I don't remember why. But every time I go back and watch it, it's my favorite every time.
I choose, with no knowledge or context, episode 19.
Wild Horses. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know which one this is.
Good, I know how to pick them.
Skimming over it, I don't remember that episode. I remember parts of that episode. It's the one where Spike takes his ship to the mechanic. But that is the only part that is ringing a bell from a quick go over. Anyways.
Matt, watch this show.
Yes, you absolutely.
I'm sure I will someday.
You should absolutely watch this show. Like, it should go on your short list. I'm not going to lie.
It's probably streaming on Funimation. But
I agree.
I think so. Yes, actually.
Yeah. So check it out if you have that app. So to transition to our final series of the day, I'd like to shout out a YouTube channel called Platina Jazz.
Woo!
And they have it's an upbeat Latin jazz channel, and they did a cover of the Real Folk Blues. I enjoyed it. I think you will too. We'll be right back.
The real folk blues, quiero sentir la tristeza verdadera dentro de mí y esa vida aquí que vivo yo
right, gentlemen. I think that it is time to explain the Holy Grail War.
Oh, God.
Oof.
Our third show today is Fate Zero. It aired from October 1st, 2011 to June 23rd, 2012. It was done by Studio Ufotable, and it is an adaptation of the light novel of the same name by Gen Urobuchi, who you may recognize as having created Puella Magi Madoka Magica and Thunderbolt Fantasy.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So the light novel, Fate Zero, is a prequel to the visual novel, Fate Stay Night, which was written by one Kinoko Nasu. Fate was always kind of a big franchise, but Fate Zero kind of helped it become more popular with a general audience, since there was never really a good anime adaptation before it, and then it just totally exploded with the mobile gacha game Fate Grand Order, which itself is written by Nasu, which is kind of rare that you have the original creator writing the mobile gacha game, and that's kind of its claim to fame, and now it is one of the top grossing franchises in Japan. Fate Zero is the second TV anime adaptation of a Fate work, the first of which was simply titled Fate Stay Night, and was created by Studio Dean, and is not very good. So now, Ufotable, they made their big name in the Fate franchise with Fate Zero. They would go on to do an adaptation of each of the remaining routes of the original visual novel. And they would even produce the cooking spin-off show Today's Menu for the Emiya Family, which it was my personal entry point to the franchise.
Sometimes I forget that show exists.
A lot of people do.
Cooking spinoff.
Fate Zero tells the story of the Fourth Holy Grail War, a ritual where 7 mages fight each other with the help of familiars called servants in the hopes of winning a wish from the all-powerful Holy Grail. Servants are created by the Holy Grail in the image of historical figures, with characters such as Gilgamesh, Alexander the Great, and King Arthur appearing. Notably, these are not the actual historical figures themselves, but they are what is called heroic spirits, which are created in the image and memory of the historical figures. And it's interesting the way that it plays with that, where the general populace's memory of the heroes is more influential in the heroic spirits. So there is the example of one Vlad Tepin, Vlad the Impaler. If he is summoned in his home country, he is Vlad the Impaler, which is what he is known for. But if he is summoned outside of there, the general populace would know him better as the inspiration for one Count Dracula, and he would be summoned as a vampire. So that's kind of how servants work in Fate Stay Night. Fate Zero is an ensemble story telling the events of the Holy Grail War with 7 masters and 7 servants, but the main characters, as I would describe them, there are 3 of them. First would be Kiritsugu Emiya, the Master of Saber. He is a mercenary hired by the prestigious Einsburn family to represent them in the Holy Grail War. He's cold and calculating. He works in the shadows, leading his opponents to believe that his wife, Iris Veal von Einsburn, is the true Master of Saber. He has aspirations of heroically saving the world, though his idea of saving is more pragmatic than noble. There is Kirei Kotomine, Master of Assassin, a spoiler selected by the head of the distinguished Tosaka family to guarantee that their own representative, Tokiyomi Tosaka, would win the war. A devout priest, he is tempted by Tosaka's servant to give in to his earthly desires and turn his back on both his faith and his ally. And finally, Waver Velvet, the Master of Rider, merely a third-generation mage in a society where your family's lineage is of the utmost importance. Waver steals a servant's catalyst so that he can participate in the Grail War to prove his worth. Timid and short-tempered, his friendship with Ryder inspires him to grow into a wise, albeit cynical mage. And you may notice that I'm referring to the servants by nouns like Saber, Rider, and Assassin. That is because that they are summoned into 7 different classes. Saber, Berserker, Archer, Lancer, Assassin, Rider, and Caster. So those 7 classes represent what the heroic spirit was most defined by as far as their ability as a hero. So whenever you hear someone refer to the character of Saber, who, if you know one character from Fate Stay Night, you probably know Saber, that is why she is called Saber, because she was best known in her life for her skills with the sword. So this is where I turn it back on to you all, and I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but what are your experiences with Fate Zero?
You people never shut up about it.
Yeah, I have absolutely zero knowledge, but I know, yeah, as you say, a lot of our friend group is knowledgeable and well-versed with it.
Mhm.
That's one way of putting it. I think I started the visual novel a long time ago. This would have been back after the days of Katawa Shoujo, when I was like, yeah, visual novels. And now I don't play a lot of visual novels.
Mm-hmm. And the original visual novel is long.
That's what I've been told. I've been told it is roughly the length of a Persona game, if not longer.
So Fate Zero was my third experience with the Fate franchise. And it is in an odd spot in the question, where do you start with Fate? Because there's really no good answer to that, unfortunately. The original visual novel, as I mentioned, is quite long, clocking in at 100 hours. But it takes place across 3 separate stories, titled Fate, Unlimited Blade Works, and Heaven's Feel, and they play out in that order. They are 3 different accounts of what can happen over the course of the story. The original story, Fate, receives the anime adaptation by Studio Dean, but I think they realized halfway through that they weren't doing a very good job and they weren't going to get another shot at it. So they just took an entire arc out of Unlimited Blade Works, slapped the main conflict of Heaven's Feel onto it, and just wedged it right into the middle of the Fate route. To mixed success.
Huh.
So it is generally agreed that you should not bother watching the original Fate Stay Night. But then where do you go from there? Do you go with Fate Zero, which has spoilers for Heaven's Feel, because it was written afterwards? Do you go with Unlimited Blade Works, which doesn't really have the best introduction to the world of Fate, because whether you're starting with the anime or starting with the visual novel, it's your second story? There's no good answer. What I have found to strangely be the best answer is to watch an episode of Fate Zero, then watch an episode of Unlimited Blade Works, and go back and forth like that.
Sounds confusing.
It is, but it works far better than it really should. Like, shockingly well. Our one friend who was determined to watch Fate incorrectly, because Heaven's Feel is being adapted as a movie trilogy, she started with Heaven's Feel 2. That was her first Fate franchise experience. And then she started doing this machete order of Fate Zero and Unlimited Blade Works back to back. And for a laugh, I did along with her and found, oops, this might be the best way to watch Fate Zero.
She's probably listening to this. You're a bad person.
My brain hurts.
And you...
That's the Fate experience. So, Fate Zero was met with universal acclaim. The first season has an 8.4 on my anime list, while the second season has an 8.6. And the second season is currently the 60th highest rated anime of all time. The first season's home video release sold 43,000 copies in 1 week, breaking Haruhi Suzumiya's record for the highest week 1 sales for an anime at the time.
Oh, that's a name I've not heard in a very long time.
Critics praised it for its animation, with THEM Anime Reviews calling it one of the most visually impressive TV series to date. The characters were also often praised, with the main character of Kiritsugu Emiya being especially praised for having a lot of depth, with sort of being a dark hero protagonist for the show. New Type awarded it with Title of the Year, Best Studio, Best Soundtrack, and Best CM. I think that means commercial. I'm not certain. The character of Ryder received Best Male Character. And it was placed on a number of publications' lists for the best anime of the decade, including lists belonging to Polygon, Crunchyroll, Comic Book Resources, IGN, and Thrillist. As a result of Fate Zero's success, as I mentioned, Ufotable would go on to be the sort of de facto studio for the canon Fate Stay Night works, and they would readapt Unlimited Blade Works, which had previously been adapted into a bad movie by Studio Dean. And Waver, an original character created for Fate Zero, would eventually receive his own spin-off novels titled The Case Files of Lord Elmaloy II, which were adapted into an anime series by Troika in 2019. The composer for Fate Zero is one Yuki Kajiura. Yuki Kajiura was born on August 6th, 1965 in Tokyo. Her family moved to Dusseldorf, West Germany in the early 70s, and did not move back until she was a teenager, so she spent the majority of her childhood in Germany. She began to play the piano in first grade by trying to copy the songs that she listened to, most of which came from her father, who loved opera and classical music. And the first song that she composed was when she was a child, and it was called Thank You, Goodbye, for her grandmother who was staying in Japan while the family moved to Germany. Kajiura would often be made to accompany her father's singing, and her brother was also a big fan of British bands, the Beatles in particular, and that was her main introduction to contemporary music. When asked in an interview, she couldn't name any particular composers or musicians that she felt had an influence on her, but she often brings up her father and brother as a big part of how her musical tastes became what they are today. She did say, however, that living in Germany influenced her on some deep level because of how different the country was from Japan. After graduating high school, she joined a band called Ichigo Sand with Chiaki Ishikawa. Apparently the band was named Ichigo, 15, Sand, because Ishikawa and her sister were 15 years old when they started it. In college, she studied English literature. Ichigo-san would stop performing when they all graduated college and started to look for jobs, and Kajiura ended up working at a communications company, and she had no intentions of making a career out of music, which I feel like tends to happen pretty often with composers.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot, especially with Japanese composers, because it's always music was the backup plan, almost. And then it just happened they took a shot in the dark and ended up in music.
Definitely rare to have the confidence to have it be a priority.
Yeah. But Kajiura would eventually join back up with Ishikawa and Yukiko Nishioka in 1992 to form a new band titled Seesaw. The group released 2 albums before eventually disbanding in 1995, but that was what ultimately led to her having a final career in music. In 2001, she rose to prominence when she composed the music for the anime Noir, the soundtrack to which sold 50,000 copies. Noir's soundtrack would reunite Kajiura and Ishikawa once again, and Ishikawa was chosen to perform one of the insert songs that Kajiura wrote for the anime. Though Seesaw is no longer officially active, Kajiura and Ishikawa still use the name when they occasionally collaborate. In 2007, she formed the vocal group Kalafina with singers Wakana Otaki and Keiko Kubota. Maya Toyoshima and Hikaru Masai would also be added to the group later. Kalafina was formed to perform the music in the Garden of Sinners films, though Kajiura wanted them to keep making music beyond that series. They would go on to perform songs for a number of anime and release 5 studio albums. Kajiura composed and arranged Kalafina's music until a contract dispute led to her parting ways with their agency Spacecraft Produce in 2018. Spacecraft promised that Kalafina would stay active, but by March 2019, the group had disbanded. She is now represented by the agency Fiction Junction Music, which she founded herself. My own read on Kajiura is that she seems to have a very go-with-the-flow attitude on music and composing. Pretty much any time that she was asked what her long-term plan was for something, she said that there wasn't one. She never intends for any group she's a part of to be a particular kind of music. She just writes what she feels like. As a viewer, she tends to prefer stories that have happy endings, though as a composer, she feels that it is easiest to write songs for dramatic moments like character deaths, which I found pretty interesting because Fate Zero's original writer, Gen Urobuchi, said something very similar when he said that even though he's most known for his tragic endings, he wants to write happy endings, though he doesn't feel like he has the talent to do so. So they ended up being a pretty good pair. I believe that they originally worked together on Madoka Magica and then pseudo reunited for Fate Zero. In an interview with Anime Dream, she said that her favorite musical instrument is the fiddle. saying, quote, "I would definitely like to collaborate with a fiddler. I've never worked with someone that's actually a professional of that specific instrument, so I'm definitely looking forward to eventually working with someone who's a master of the fiddle."
Fiddles are rad. She is correct.
I would like to see an anime with fiddle-heavy music.
That anime is called Whisper of the Heart by Studio Ghibli.
She likes to listen to music from all over the world, even though she doesn't understand the lyrics in different languages. She hopes that foreign audiences are able to similarly enjoy her music, not just thinking of it as Japanese music. And when she was asked what she likes to do in her spare time, she said, sleep.
Same.
Relatable.
She has an expansive discography, having worked on nearly 50 anime soundtracks for both film and television, including Dot Hack Sign, Madoka Magica, Sword Art Online, The Garden of Sinners, and Demon Slayer. Her most recent work was on Lord Elmaloy's Case Files. She's also produced 16 studio albums, performed 2 solo albums, and wrote 10 stage musicals.
Damn.
She has also composed for a few video game soundtracks, the most notable of which that I saw were for Xenosaga 2 and 3. Fate Zero's staff was made up of alumni from the Garden of Sinners films, so Kajiura was picked pretty much from the start. The producer, Hikaru Kondo, described the music in Garden of Sinners as being very feminine, but for Fate Zero, they wanted to hear Kajiura's masculine side. She felt that the story of Fate Zero had a distinct sense of weight, so she wanted her music to reflect that feeling. The soundtrack was designed to be something that lurked in the background behind the characters, always there, but never quite clear. And the biggest difference from working on Garden of Sinners was that the music could not be scored to the timing of the scene. The way that it works in most film scoring is that you have the visuals of the film first, and then the music is written to specifically match the moment-by-moment beats of the film. With anime productions, you can't really do that because of how much of anime production is done like as last minute as possible, because that's just how the anime industry is. So, for the most part, Kajiura was just told what the general tone of a scene would be, and then it was up to the editors to make everything match. There was one exception to this, though, in the show's first episode, where the opening and ending scenes were scored film style. And that is going to bring us into our 5 critical tracks. Starting with one of the film-scored tracks from episode 1, Point Zero. So this song plays at the very end of the episode as the mages are summoning their servants. It's the big kickoff of the Holy Grail War, and the intensity ramps up over the course of the scene before it reaches a fever pitch right at the appearance of Saber, which closes out the episode. And it's a big moment because the Saber in Fate Zero is the same character as the Saber in Fate Stay Night, which is not true for any other character in the show.
The beginning of this song, at the very least, gives me like... It dies very quickly afterwards, but the beginning almost reminds me of Snake Eater. Kind of. Please tell me I'm not the only one.
I think you're getting that from the percussion.
Maybe? I mean, it dies once more instruments start coming in. And, like, obviously the choir and all that. That's not Snake Eater.
Not at all.
But the beginning, I don't know. It reminds me of, like, the start of that game or something.
I almost feel like the ending of this is a little bit Sawano. Like, very, very epic. I like the sound of it a whole lot for just hearing it for the first time.
I can definitely feel that. Sawano's tracks tend to have this same high intensity. Though this is more of a slow build than the way that Sawano ramps things up for a drop at the end,
Yeah,
where it just explodes. Whereas as this builds up the tension to act as like the big cliffhanger at the end of the first episode.
It definitely sounds like a cliffhanger in music form. I'll give it that. It does very good at that.
Yeah. And so, like I said, this was one of the only tracks in the show that was film scored. And at the very end of the track, actually, as they said in an interview, that originally it ended up being a little too long when they dropped it into the animation, but they ended up liking that pacing so much that they just extended the shot and kept it as it was because it felt more suspenseful, which I would agree. It's a very big moment, especially like the first time that I ever saw this. I was not like going to watch the show in earnest. I was just hanging out as some other friends were watching it. And like, I was making some jokes because I didn't know it was going to be the same saber that like is in Fate's Day Night. So with that context, it was a very huge moment of like, oh. The second track that I selected, Grief. So the rest of the soundtrack, because it was not film scored, they are pretty much all songs that are used in multiple contexts, but I know this one best for its use in the 12th episode, when Iris Veal is explaining the physical cost that the Grail War is having on her to Saber. This is a obviously slower solo piano piece, which contrasts some of the more high energy pieces that the rest of the show has. And it has the main motif of the song taken from Point Zero, which I'm kind of a big fan of reusing motifs. So this is a really good use of music for me, where reusing that same motif kind of evokes the feeling of the human cost of the Grail War. It's the same music being repurposed to evoke a different feeling. And the way that it focuses on the piano, whereas the rest of Kajiura's music is very heavy on strings, it creates a great contrast for me.
I mean, you know me, I'm always down for a piano solo piece.
I was going to say, yeah, you're right to bring that in here.
This is the right place to bring it. Yeah, it's a very nice piece. I like it a lot.
The third critical track. This was described in a Reddit comment as being the song that they liked so much they used it in all of the battle scenes. The battle is to the strong. So, as the Reddit comment implied, this one is used a lot through the show. I think the best use of it is in Season 2, Episode 11, when Kiritsugu is fighting Kirei. To me, this song is very, laser-focused on what Kajiura's style is. It's got the dark string sound, it's got a chanting choir, and then in the back half of the song, it just transitions into a crazy rock guitar solo that just turns up the action intensity to untold levels so far. And this, when I think of Kajiura's style, this most of my favorite songs from her sound something like this.
This is very Devil May Cry, like earlier Devil May Cry. Like, am I right in thinking that?
I'd think so. If anything, listening to this and trying to start piecing together what the sound was, the first thing that jumped to my mind was Nier Automata.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, I would say that there's a pretty close through line between Yuki Kajiura and Keiichi Okabe. They have similar styles. There's also a little reference in the title of this song to the Bible verse Ecclesiastes 9:11. Which I won't go too into detail because it sort of spoils the late conflicts of the show a little bit. but it could be read as encapsulating the character conflict between the pragmatic assassin Kiritsugu and the corrupt holy man Kirei. The fourth track is You Are My King. Just hearing this track it makes me want to cry a little bit. It's easily the most emotional moment of the show. It is in Season 2, Episode 10, with Ryder's goodbye to Waver, which transitions into his final stand against Gilgamesh. This song carries such a huge weight in the story for culminating the character arcs of two of my favorite characters in the show, which many people after watching this, they agree Waver and Ryder are the standout arc in the show. And it has this feeling of like the historical focus that Ryder has with his true identity of Alexander the Great. He is someone of huge historical importance, and Waver Velvet is just a guy trying to prove himself. And like the bond formed between these two characters is like the main thing of this franchise that appeals to me so much. And I feel like this song just perfectly encapsulates that.
Even without the context, you can kind of hear that. It's a lot like what you mentioned for Blue back in Bebop, where like despite having no context, you can pretty much tell. So yeah, it's kind of that same thing. Yeah,
emotionally heavy for sure.
Yeah, and like the song has two halves. Like there's the slow emotional bit at the beginning, and then the more action-oriented, fast bit near the end. And I think they both capture Ryder's personality specifically very well. And this, I feel like, as far as capturing the events on screen, like even though this wasn't film scored, it feels like this piece is perfectly what the story is about in this moment. And I feel like it is one of the greatest successes of the soundtrack for that reason. The final critical track, which is one of the final pieces that we hear in the show, Tragedy and Fate. So this plays in the final episode as Saber reflects on the end of the Grail War. It, again, reuses the motif from Point Zero that Grief used. Like I said, I like motifs that get reused a lot. But this is the song that sort of makes the statement of what Fate Zero was about. It's got a very grim tone through the whole show, but by the end of the piece, it starts to transform into a hopeful triumph, sort of reminding us that one day Saber will still have the chance to achieve greatness later in Fate Stay Night. And it's, I think, one of the perfect songs to end the series with.
I do very much like the swell. I think the swell is absolutely fantastically done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I dig this song. Again, like, I don't have context for any of this. The unfortunate part is when talking about Fate, when you're not familiar with Fate, is sometimes like those videos of like, this is what English sounds like to people that don't speak English. Except not really, because it's not, I mean, I made that same, like, in a personal conversation, I made that same comparison to when people talk about One Piece. One Piece is way worse with that. One Piece is way, way worse with that. But it's very close to that where it's like, I don't have context for any of this, but you can still like when explained, it still sort of sticks just from the explanation itself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I love the way that you describe hearing about Fate as like what English sounds like to people that don't speak English, because that is perfectly how I would describe the way that Kinoko Nasu uses English. So like I mentioned that the servants are split up into the different classes, and the class Archer, the first two archers that we see in the franchise, I don't think Nasu knows what an archer is. Because the archer in Fate Stay Night primarily uses swords. And the archer in Fate Zero, so he is Gilgamesh, who historically had all of humanity's treasures in his treasure vault. And the reason that he is an archer is that he opens the gates of Babylon, which are like a magical portal, and shoots swords out of it.
That's not an archer.
I mean, he's shooting something. At what point do you draw the line?
So yeah, that's what Nasu thinks that an archer is. So, on the cutting room floor, Joe, I believe that you had a track.
So, again, not being familiar with literally any of this, I also wasn't familiar with any of the soundtrack. So I asked for some suggestions, and the one that really stood out to me was Army of the King. Mostly because, and Peter, you're the better like authority on this. Does this or does this not have some God of War vibes to it? Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Some vibes, sure.
More older God of War than like the most recent God of War. But yeah.
Oh, this is a major music theme for Ryder. It's who, as I mentioned, is Alexander the Great, who you could probably describe as a God of War, to be honest. This piece was actually in my first draft for the Critical 5. I think it plays during what I think is my favorite moment of Season 1, and it has such like an incredible sort of epic swell to it. And it's like the moment where like the story is affirming Ryder as like the great hero king who inspired legions to follow him. And I think that the song does a wonderful job of conveying that. So for my selections for Cutting Room Floor, the first track that we have is Let the Stars Fall Down. This plays in the 8th episode when Iris Veal is holding off Kirei in battle. I wanted to focus on the biggest hits of the show for the Critical 5, but this song is one of my favorites on the soundtrack. I really love the way that it sort of conveys a sense of whimsy without losing the darker tone of the rest of the soundtrack. And it's really kind of unique. I can't really name a lot of songs that feel like this one off the top of my head.
See, the instant I heard it, it sounds like a less rocky Bravely Default. A little bit.
I could see that.
It's mostly the beginning with the violins. Sound like something I'd hear in a Bravely Default game.
Mm-hmm. And like this one is another one of those tracks that is like quintessentially Yuki Kajiura for me. Like I can also hear a lot of her musical style from Madoka in this. My second track on the Cutting Room Floor is one of the ending songs. The sky is high and the wind sings. This is the second season ending performed by Haruna Luna. It has a very pensive tone that contrasts a lot with both the show's overall feeling, as well as most other anime endings that I'm familiar with. But I think that it conveys a very particular sad, regretful emotion that fits with the show very well. And I don't want to spoil too much, but the lyrics are about Kiritsugu. So, let's say it's a bit of a big one. So, what will I never forget about Fate Zero? Well, as insane as it is for me to say, I do think that bizarre machete order that I watched the show in for the first time works shockingly well. It was not my first time watching Unlimited Blade Works, but it was my first time watching Fate Zero. And it just kind of clicked the way that certain episodes matched up. So that was kind of weird and worked very well. But I also, like I said, I really love the theme of mixing modern day mundane protagonists with great heroes from history. I think that it is my favorite part of the Fate franchise, and Fate Zero specifically pulls it off better than any other piece of the Fate franchise does, between, using Alexander the Great and showing how he inspires people, having Saber, who you probably know her identity, but I won't spoil it anyway, just in case. But the way that her worldview as a leader conflicts with that of Kiritsugu's, the way that Gilgamesh tempts the people around him into acting against their best interests just because he thinks it's fun. Seeing the historical figures brought into the real world, it just works for me in a way that it's just so memorable and so incredible, and I think that it's really earned its place on many of the anime of the decade lists.
I'll never forget about it. None of you people will let me.
I don't see myself watching it, but the soundtrack sounds pretty great, so maybe more listens of that.
I'm sure at some point I will probably break down and watch it, though Ben will actually stab me and all of you if I do that. So
I mean, Joe, for all like the memeing we've done, and for all like the antagonizing you that we've done, I do genuinely think that the Fate franchise falls into something that you specifically would like.
Oh, I legitimately believe you. But I haven't even had time to watch things that I know I like. So, maybe one of these days. We'll see.
So, for a very special episode of Original Sound Chat, great to have not only talking about anime soundtracks for this week in particular, but also, Matt, thank you for joining us as a guest. Really wonderful to have you. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me. I've been kind of worrying at a 3-man sound chat doesn't make any sense for months, but here we are.
Well, I can't imagine it's something we're going to do very often, but I think it was a nice change of pace for 1 week at least.
Absolutely. So that will do it for us this week on Original Sound Chat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga, and Matt is over at Grimace Do Menace. You can find their podcast, Smashed to Pieces, on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. And that's where you can find the MP3 podcast version for Original Sound Chat here. The video version is over on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But yeah, hit up anondino.squarespace.com for that MP3 podcast version. Also on podcast storefronts all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, what have you. Take it with you on a run in your car. At work, I guess, if you are still working during this strange time. And we really won't tell your boss that, we're listening to conversations about great game soundtracks.
That's true. I didn't think about the fact that part of our intro or our outro doesn't work anymore.
It's a little
for
weird.
A while.
It's a little weird.
We don't have to tell your kids that are with you when you're working because they're home for school.
Perfect. You can also find our podcast on Spotify, not only as a podcast feed, but we have a big Spotify playlist that usually, if any video game songs are talked about on the show, they're added to the Spotify playlist. Joe, what about that Spotify playlist?
I mean, nothing from this week's going on it. For what it's worth, Initial D, a lot of this music, pretty much all the songs that we talked about today are on Spotify. You can find them. They're great. Go listen to them. Matt wanted me to mention that Fate Zero, much like Persona last week, is on Spotify, but it is region locked to Japan.
Someday.
And Cowboy Bebop is unfortunately, as much as my heart hurts to say it, not on Spotify at all.
Ah, rude.
You can get most of the openings and endings to Fate Zero on the American Spotify, though.
Fair enough. And hopefully this gives us some more time during these troubling odd times to pump out some more bonus tracks for you all. So, on this anime version of Original Soundchat, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
We broke that kayfabe immediately. I don't...
In this alternate reality, I would be talking about Reimi Horikawa.
I'll be talking about Yusuke Honma.
I suppose I would be talking about Yoshiaki Fujisawa.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Matt, let's play us out.
So this is a cover of the song Grief from Fate Zero by YouTuber Kyle Landry. It's surprisingly difficult to find covers of Fate Zero music on YouTube, but this one sort of ramps up the intensity of the song a little bit. It still has the same tone of like darkness and sadness, but it's more of like an epic sadness, if that makes sense. So this one really stuck with me.
All right. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat anime version. We'll see you next time. Take care.